The four candidates, I'm not going to give an introduction. I'm going to try and save time. Each one's going to speak for about 7 minutes. I'll just tell you who they are, and they can talk about themselves, whatever detail they'd like. First, speaking right here on my right, Chris Worthington will be the first speaker. Second, Tony Thurman, who's right over here, will be speaking second. Nancy Skinner, who's right there, will be speaking third. And Phil Polikoff, right here, will be speaking fourth. And I've decided not to run, so I won't speak at all today. I actually thought seriously about it, to be honest, but I decided not to do it. I'm the first person who actually is not doing it to actually spend time with their family, unlike all the other politicians who lie. And I'm not a crook. Thank you so much. Please welcome Chris Worthington.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, in the plural, you Cal students generically, because without UC Berkeley students, I would have had no political career. I was elected to the Berkeley City Council by losing in every neighborhood precinct in our city council district that includes this campus. Every single homeowner district I lost. Every single student district I won by astronomical proportions, like 3-to-1 margin. So without young people getting up off of their butts and getting out there and working to make a difference in the city of Berkeley, I would never have been on the city council and been able to do the many things that I've done over the course of the last 11 years. Since then, I hope that I've repaid the favor, because I have hired and appointed and helped to get elected more students than any council member ever in the history of the city of Berkeley. Approximately half of the commissioners that I appoint to the various 35 city commissions are students. I've gone to Sacramento and lobbied against fee hikes, and I've fought very hard to support education funding, and I've worked on hundreds of different issues that many of the best ideas in Berkeley come from you, and then they work their way through the city bureaucracy and through the state bureaucracy. And I see myself, it's sort of funny, one of the other council members has said that I'm a tool of the Sierra Club and a slave to the students. And she means this in a negative way. I actually think of that as flattery, because I am a tool of the Sierra Club and of other social movements. I'm a passionate environmentalist, a passionate labor advocate, and I work on hundreds of different issues. And so you can look on our website and see some of the range of issues I've worked on. In the course of my 11 years, some of our biggest victories have been budgets. Now, you're reading right now about the state budget is in a state of catastrophe. And Arnold Schwarzenegger is applying, this cut everything, including education. Well, if you're smart enough to get into UC Berkeley, you probably know that slashing education funding is not only going to hurt the students who are coming here in the next couple of years, it's going to hurt the entire workforce of the entire state of California for decades to come. So his penny-wise, pound-foolish economic policies are catastrophic and destructive, not just to students, but also to the economy of the state of California. I will make education my #1 priority, and I will make the budget a #1 priority for the entire budget. In the city of Berkeley, I have gotten millions of dollars dedicated to important priorities, such as affordable housing, increasing access of low-income people to health care. And for 11 years, some of the other council members are sort of jealous, like, well, how does he get so much money for all the things that he wants? Well, I mean, one of the ways is I do my homework. Most council members read the budget, which is about this thick. That's the book they give out. I actually go to the city manager and say, give me the whole budget, which is this thick. And I read every single thing and I study it. And when people say we can't afford to put $1 million a year into affordable housing, I'm like, well, we have 1.7 million in this fund over here and 300,000 over here, and we can move this around. And that, one of my passions is to get on the budget committee and do a major overhaul of the state budget, which, as you can see in the current situation, we need progressive people who can actually crunch the numbers and know what kinds of budget proposals we need to make. Because much, I mean, many of our values, we think of, we want to help people. Well, in order to help people, you have to get the money in order to pay for the services. And that is 1 minute to go? Okay, well, in my final minute, I just want to say I have been endorsed by numerous local elected officials. The only statewide organization, the only, which is Equality California, Progressive Democrats of the East Bay, and the Berkeley Daily Planet. In all of my previous campaigns, I was endorsed by the Daily Cal, and I'm hoping that when they get around to it, they'll endorse me again. And I am a vigorous, passionate fighter for every progressive cause under the sun. But as deeply progressive as I am, I also have common sense, so I don't make some of the mistakes that other people on the city council make. But I fight hard for every progressive cause that you care about and you believe in. And I look forward to working beside you throughout this campaign and in Sacramento. Thank you.
Okay, second we will hear from Tony Thurman.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation to be here today. It's good to be on campus. I used to be a resident director here and at Unit 1 Residence Hall. Anybody ever live in Unit 1 Residence Halls? Putnam, Freeborn? Unit 1? It's interesting, in the 2 years that I worked and lived on the campus, I never saw the inside of any classroom or any lecture hall, kind of like my undergraduate experience. I recommend that you don't do that. It's interesting being on campus and thinking about my own experience. It was on the campus that really activism became really awake for me, that I really began to realize that there's an opportunity to be relevant and to help make change. It's the first time anybody ever asked me to be on a committee or to work on something, gave me a project and said, carry it out. I got elected to the student body president position at Temple University in Philadelphia, where I grew up. And that's the first time I was advocating for education. We'd drive up to the Capitol and we'd say we don't want our student fees to go up. And we'd talk to legislators and say we want change. And that's the kind of thing that I'll be fighting for as the assembly person for the 14th district. As I think about it, being on campus was the first time that I really began to understand what they meant when they said, be the change that you want to see in the world. If you think about it right now, our world begs for change right now. We're in an unjust war that never should have taken place and that we should be out of. Our economy is the worst that it's ever been, and our international standing is the worst that it's ever been. We have environmental problems that threaten our life and well-being. Healthcare is a major challenge. We have social problems. If you know about Richmond, where I'm on the city council, we're fighting every day to try to reduce violence and to help young people not be in harm's way. So the world is really waiting for you and me to make change. We can sit on the sidelines and wait for somebody else to make change, or we can get in the fight and we can make change right now. Is that all right with you? Let me try that again. If you're prepared to make change, let me hear you say, yeah. I'm going to ask this side of the room. If you think we can have success in making real change, let me hear you say, oh, yeah. Some of y'all didn't hear me now. Come on now, don't get me started. This mic is getting kind of hot. If you think that our generation is relevant and we're going to be the change we want to see in the world, let me hear you say, oh, yeah. All right. We're getting it warmed up. Come on now, guest speaker. That means, if you didn't do the reading, you catch a little break. So show some enthusiasm. Education, we talked about education. I have to say, education saved my life. I wouldn't be standing in front of you if it weren't for education. I lost my mother to cancer when I was 6. And I grew up in a tough neighborhood in Philadelphia. And all along the way, people encouraged me to get an education. And higher education helped me to open my career to be a social worker. I've been a nonprofit manager for 15 years, and I run a nonprofit in Alameda County for young people who are coming out of foster care, who at the age of 18 are asked to go out on their own with no family, no support. And we provide housing for them. I also oversee a health clinic for the youth, so you can be sure that I'll be advocating for health care issues and foster care issues. I've raised over $1 million to help strengthen foster care programming in Alameda County. I've worked to reduce violence in the city of Richmond and to promote a regional kind of cooperation between Richmond and Berkeley and Oakland and other cities, because we're experiencing violence at really a nationwide trend. But more work is needed. And I want to work with you. If you hear nothing else from our conversation today, I would like to work with you. And if you're interested in politics, if you're interested in getting involved in the community, if you're interested in getting change done, I'd like to have the opportunity to work with you. And it's Tony Thurman at TonyThurman.com. And Chris is here with me today. If you're interested, he'll sign you up. Chris is in the back, and he'll sign you up. Every issue that you can imagine is paramount in this campaign at this time, now more so than at any other time in our life. I'm on a negotiating team to say that some of the biggest refineries in our country have to reduce their emissions now, not wait till 2025. I live in a community where there have been refineries for over 100 years that have been polluting air in the poorest communities. People of color have been suffering asthma, cancer rates, and these are refineries that have had Chevron, I'll say their name. These are refineries that have had some of the highest record profits in the last quarter, yet they're asking to have their property assessment taxes lifted. They're saying we can't afford to pay. They're saying we have to process dirtier crude. What they're really saying is we don't think anybody's paying attention. We don't think anybody cares. What I'm saying is, as a city council person, I'm demanding that they have transparency. Every time they flare, every time they emit something into the air, we want to know what it is. Every time they say we need to process dirtier crude, my message to them is, you don't need to process dirtier crude. Spend the money to process cleaner crude. Do right by the city that's done right by you, and don't leave people in harm's way. And if you can't reduce your emissions down to zero, then you're not going to get a vote from the city council person. So the environment is paramount. We know education is critical. We used to be first in this country in everything, including education. But Prop 13 came along, and they made a rule that said corporations could pay the same property taxes that they've been paying since the 1970s. If you talk to your families about their property taxes in California, they'll tell you every time a home sells, the property taxes get reassessed, and every year we pay more and more in taxes. But we allow the largest corporations in the world to pay the same taxes that they've been paying since the 1970s. If we want to be serious about putting money in public education and fixing our busted budget in this state, we've got to get serious about the correct type of taxation. And if any of you are millionaires in here, I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it to you right up front. I want to tax you, okay? I want to tax you. Because for the last 8 years, President Bush has allowed the wealthiest earners in this country to get all kinds of tax breaks. And if we want to get serious about making change, we need the money to do it. Are you down with that? You want some money? You want to make education number one again in this country? The world is waiting for you. Whatever you decide to do, whoever you support, I'd like to be working with you shoulder to shoulder. My name is Tony Thurman. I'm running for the 14th Assembly District, and I thank you for your time.
Okay, we'll now hear from Nancy Skinner.
All right, so before I start, I walked around because I'm very used to this building and this room. I'm used to working the hallways because I started my political work as an activist on this campus. I came here, I didn't expect to go to UC Berkeley. I wanted to go to UC Santa Cruz, but at the point I applied, UC Berkeley. Nobody's parents wanted to send them to UC Berkeley because they were afraid if they sent their kids to UC Berkeley, they'd get tear gassed. So people weren't coming here. And I got redirected from Santa Cruz to Berkeley. So that's how I ended up here. But when I got here, what an incredible place. And what a wonderful, wonderful place to not only get an academic education, but to become an activist. And I was so fortunate to have professors whose motto was, don't let school get in the way of your education. I'm going to pass these out on this side because I didn't manage to walk on this part of the hallway. So if you could take one and pass it around. I brought you a little history. I happen to be the first and only UC student who has ever been elected to the Berkeley City Council. And that happened in 1984. Now, I had a long history of activism on the campus. And fortunately, at that point in time, there used to be a grassroots political organization in the city of Berkeley that had a commitment to student representation. And every year, they ran a slate of candidates for the city council, and they always included a UC Berkeley student on that slate. That was their commitment. We don't have that now. Where do you see a community organization recruiting one of you to be on the city council? But that's what we had then. And I was recruited because I was an activist on campus. I happened at that point to be ASUC Academic Affairs Vice President. And I ran. Now, one of the little articles on that sheet shows that the first time I ran, I didn't win. I was the top vote getter of the losers, but I didn't win. But still, the community group didn't abandon me. They didn't say, oh, you know, we're just going to give up on students. They recruited me again. So in 1984, then I was a grad student in education here. I ran, and I won. And not only did I win, I was the top vote getter. And that's because students and people all over the community supported me. And I can tell you some about my history, but first I want to tell you a little bit about, well, when I walked in here, I had this deja vu. Because when I was Academic Affairs Vice President of ASUC, how many of you have been to an academic senate meeting? You know, the faculty people? Okay, a couple. They're the people that govern, besides the regents. You know, the regents govern all the campuses, right? But the people that govern this campus right here is that academic senate. And when I was at school, tell me, does the program DECAL still exist? All right, my office started that. And we started it because we wanted to promote independent studies and student-initiated courses. We wanted to give students the opportunity to invent their own courses. Because we felt that, like you feel, there's things, you have things you want to learn that the campus, the university is not offering you, right? So that gives you the opportunity to initiate and invent your own courses. Well, the Academic Senate didn't like that idea. So they tried to stop it. And they had a big meeting in here. The place was full. Now, of course, as you know, most of the faculty, white men in suits. The place was full of white men in suits. And we wanted to stop them from eliminating the student-initiated courses, because that was their objective. So we worked these every row, giving them out flyers, telling them why. And before that, we had gone to a lot of faculty members and enlisted their support, and we got them to speak on our behalf. And we defeated their effort to try to eliminate student-initiated courses. And that's why you still have them today. So I had this memory when I walked in here. But now, why am I running for the assembly? I mentioned to you already, I did serve on the Berkeley City Council. I served for 8 years. I also now serve on the East Bay Regional Park District Board. So you know Tilden Park? Okay, that's the Park District Board. So I'm on that now. But the reason I'm running for the assembly is California is in a crisis. When I was a kid, and I'm native Californian, I went to the public schools in California. When I was a child, California was #1 in public education. #1. New York, Massachusetts, California. Highest quality public schools, top per pupil expenditures. What are we today? You got it, 47 or something. It's ridiculous. We've abandoned our commitment to public education. And when I came here, most everybody could afford to go to this campus. It was affordable. What kind of fees do you pay now? They're outrageous. They're outrageous. And if you're taking out loans, how many years are you going to have to pay off those loans? Yeah. Well, that is not the California that I grew up in. And that's not the California that you and I love and want. California is so well known as an environmental leader, and I have very strong environmental credentials, and I can talk about that. That's my professional work. I've spent 15 years working solely and only on global warming, and that's my expertise. And I'll continue that when I'm in the state legislature. But the environmental issues, California's pretty good on. We're one of the leaders in the world, and we're great on technology and innovation, but we have abandoned our commitment to public education. And that means we've abandoned you, and we've abandoned people, and that's not right. That's why I'm running, because that's my commitment. My master's, I told you I went to grad school, was here, education. Now, what's the other thing that's really on, I think, everybody's minds? How many of you expect, I know you all feel pretty good you're going to get a job after going to a school like this, but how many of you expect that that job is going to provide you health care benefits? Yeah, not too many people are holding up their heads, huh? Some, I'm glad, but a whole lot of people didn't. Well, my daughter has her degree from Cal, or not Cal, sorry, UC Santa Cruz. She went there, I didn't. She has her degree from Santa Cruz. She's got a job now, no health benefits. None whatsoever. Well-paying job, she's qualified, well-credentialed, but hey, the industry standard is don't provide health benefits. What happens to her and you if you get sick and you don't have health care? So my other reason, we have to have accessible, affordable health care for all. So I have to stop. I want your help. I want you to help elect me to the state legislature, Nancy Skinner, www.nancyskinnerforassembly.com, and I want you to work with me. I want you to come up with bills and legislation, okay? I want you to author legislation. Then you can be the change that Tony was talking about. Thank you.
Okay, and our last speaker, and then we're going to open it up for your questions for all the candidates, is Phil Polikoff.
Thank you so very much. It's an honor to be here today. I came to Berkeley in 1973 to come to be a part of this university. I came to be an employee. I was the first staff member as a physician for the Labor Occupational Health Program. I came to be a student. I was a master's in the School of Public Health. And I also came to be a lecturer. I taught in a unit that was here then, that isn't here, called Theme House. Anyone ever even heard of it? It was the experimental college at Berkeley, where courses that normally you couldn't take in the main faculty were here. So over the last 30 years, Berkeley's held a very special place for me. And yes, I am still waiting to go to the Rose Bowl. That hasn't occurred yet, but it will happen. Before I share a little bit about my own personal background, I thought it would be important to try to get a sense of where you folks are, since maybe there's a generational gap, and I didn't really want to have that. So I talked to my son, who's home from spring break, where he's a undergraduate at the University of Michigan, and he gave me David Letterman's top 6. You can either agree with it or not on what he thought the major problems were as being a student in university today. His first issue was, number 6, were societal issues. Some people are more engaged in it than others. Some people were into global warming or the presidential race or the like. The next one was future employment concerns. Where are you going to get your jobs when you get out of here to pay off the loans that are upon you at this point? Fourth was social life. He's struggling to say, is it better to be in a Greek house or not a Greek house? So that was relevant to him. He's not, because he's a singer and all his time is taken up in the glee club and in the a cappella choir. Third was financial concerns. He says that was paramount. All the kids were talking about in his dorm or his apartment was who's going to pay the bill, not only long-term, but short-term. He doesn't feel comfortable spending money because he doesn't know where it's coming from. Second is the sense of liberation. I thought this was cute. He said, I thought it was great to get away to college, but in reality, I miss my mom's food at home. So it wasn't as good as I thought it was. And first and foremost for him was lack of time. He has an impossible time saying, I want to do this or that. And he tells me that there are 2 TV shows now that are very important that he can't see. One is Lost. Anyone seen Lost? Okay, and the other one was Gossip Girl. You got that? So those were 2. And I said, okay, Elliot, now that I got the top 6 list, where does the legislative process fit into? It fits into societal issues, future employment concerns, and it certainly has to do with financial concerns. I can't deal with Lost or Gossip Girl. So he said, that's okay. Address your colleagues there and the other students about these issues. Where am I coming from? My background's a little different than the other candidates, and I applaud the other candidates for being in the race as well. I think it's an incredible experience getting involved in democracy. I come from immigrant parents. My parents, like many others from California, had their roots someplace else. No, not New York in my case. They were from the overseas in Russia and Poland. I then came into this world believing that there was a reason to do different than my parents. Their concerns were raised with me, how do you have economic, social, and civil justice? So from a younger age, I started in public schools and was in university for 15 years, maybe a little too long. I got a degree in agriculture from Cornell, a degree in environmental engineering from Rutgers, a medical degree from Wayne State and Oxford, and I arrived in Detroit at the time of the race riots. So I got to see firsthand what conflagration was and how do you take a city from where it was and try to resurrect it. I came to Berkeley to deal with the issues of environmental toxics. So I spent the next 10 years of my life dealing with the asbestos issue. Some of you might not remember it, but there were Rosie the Riveters and Sam the shipfitters who were working in the ships that saved our country in World War II, who were all exposed to asbestos, and subsequently many of them died from asbestos-related disease. I honed my teeth on trying to get asbestos out of all those workplaces. At the same time, some of you might remember that there was another September 11th. September 11th, 1973. Did any of you ever see the movie Missing? Chile, the revolution, Salvador Allende killed. I was there at that time, dealing with civil rights in Chile on a U.S. diplomatic passport. So paying the dues to progressivism, I did. I then entered into different phases of my life. I started to work for the California legislature for 10 years, almost 10 years, on social policy. I spent the last 30 years on healthcare policy. And let me just share you some things about healthcare policy. We have accomplished very little in the last 5 years. Our statistics are even comparable to the education statistics. We are 37th in the world in longevity and 45th in quality of life. The cost of healthcare now consumes 16% of the gross national product. And there are 6.5 million people uninsured in California and 47 million. We have no policy. Simultaneously, we have not done very well in wellness, and we have not done well in the quality of care. So in healthcare, 3 things you want to remember: cost, access, and quality. And the most important thing is to remember the World Health Organization's definition of health. It is a state of emotional, social, and physical well-being, not solely the absence of illness and infirmity. Why do I want to go to Sacramento? 3 major issues. One is education, public safety, and economic development. My wife and I are incredibly involved in new economic development in socially responsible business, such as Tesla, the electric race car, such as Solar City, such as Elephant Pharmacy, such as Bright Source, new energy in the Mojave Desert. This is what gets jobs and new revenue to offset some of the problems with the taxation issues, which Tony is totally correct. We have to alter the payroll taxes so it's fairer. We have to deal with the sales taxes, and especially we have to make sure a corporation pays more, especially when you look at the loophole that many got off with the fishing boats in South San Diego now. So in summation, like the others, I do solicit your support. It's a little different website, maybe a little easier to remember, Phil for Assembly. Easy? Let me repeat it. Dr. Phil for Assembly. I look forward to your participation. I look forward to having you on this journey. And democracy is a great thing, but you got to work for it. Thank you, Alan, and thank you.
If all the candidates want to come up, and then we'll take questions. Here he comes. Okay, questions. If you want to, for a specific candidate or for all the candidates, we're going to have short questions, and we'll start with Scott because he asked good questions. The question is, what would the candidates do about the UC Regents?
Yeah, UC Regents haven't been any big friend to students, have they? And that's the truth for a long, long time. What can we do about it? We've got a student, so that's one vote. We have to get a good governor. Governors are members of the Board of Regents, right? Lieutenant governors are members of the Board of Regents. So we have to make education and investment in publication, education our number one priority, which would then have us elect those kind of people who would then appoint regents who would be more responsive and who wouldn't just be looking at UC as a way to service corporations. That's an important role, but it shouldn't be the sole or the primary. The primary role of the Regents and University of California should be to serve students.
Thank you. I think it may be a little bit more complex than, yes, you do have to make sure you get the right appointees to the Regents. And yes, I think once you're in there, you have to have a great deal of transparency. I don't think historically you've had enough transparency to see what they're doing, and that's almost like in public disclosure, the Brown Act, you should have the same thing with the Board of Regents. Everything should be totally transparent, and you have to have more accountability. What's happened recently on the auditing is showing that there's been a lack of accountability. I think Richard Blum has done a very good job showing that some of the management of UC could have been a little bit better and the greater efficiency, so the resources you have can be used to the max and also get additional resources as you need it.
So in a perfect world, what we'd do is we'd add more students to the Regents, and you'd be represented by peers, and I would guarantee, well, I'd say it's likely that you're going to be more satisfied with the outcomes and the decisions that are being made on your behalf. That would be a long-term strategy. We know that's not a short-term strategy. The Regents are looking at very complex decisions, but in my mind, when we have to make decisions that are complex, we need to be inviting all the stakeholders to be involved to help make those decisions. We should be asking you what to do. The Regents should be asking you what to do. As public servants, we work for you. You're the bosses. You are the clients of the Regents, and they should be asking you as the most important stakeholder what kind of policies that you want.
Well, the single biggest thing that we can do is to build a powerful coalition that includes all the people who are getting screwed by the Regents. That includes students are neglected, ignored, disrespected, but students aren't the only people in that category. You know, cities in the Bay Area, pretty much every single union at UC Berkeley has had to have some kind of union picket line action in the last 10 years. I mean, if some private corporation treated their employees the way UC does, you know, we would all be boycotting that corporation. But it's not about adding a few students. I mean, it would be popular to tell you we need to add more students, but that's not a solution. We need total structural reform of the Board of Regents. We need a ballot measure because we're not going to be able to get it passed by the legislature and signed by the governor. So we need structural reforms through a ballot measure reforming the Regents. Thanks.
All right, let's go over here. Okay. Question is the City Council's resolution about the Marines.
You know, I'm almost inclined to just hand it over to the sitting Berkeley City Council member who's here, because he's had to live that issue. Again, it's really complicated, and I guess I'd have to say I'd approach it like this. And I'm speaking as a person who has a brother who's already served a term in Iraq, and I couldn't be more opposed to this war. I've been out planting crosses out in Lafayette. I just think that it's just wrong. And it hurts my heart when I think about soldiers who've lost their lives in this war. I think about civilians living in Iraq and other places who've lost their lives in this war. I'm completely opposed to it. Having said that, I think that any group has the right to speak, and that's a right that's guaranteed by our Constitution. I don't agree with a provision that is in our education code that says No Child Left Behind says that every school has to give the names of kids in their school to the military so they can recruit them to go fight in just wars. And if I were in Congress, I'd be fighting to change that. So I'm completely opposed to it. But having said that, people have the right to speak their mind as long as they do so in a way that's peaceable and does not infringe on other people's rights. We may not want you here, but ultimately the Constitution guarantees and safeguards the right to free speech.
Well, I believe I'm the only member of the Berkeley City Council who's had to vote on this, who has proved that you can be pro-peace, pro-patriotism, and pro-politeness. I supported the right of people to protest. I think, let as many people as protest as want to. But I was also insulted and I knew that veterans across the country, people your age or a little bit older, are risking their lives for defending us. It may be a poorly chosen war for the wrong reasons, but they're risking their lives. What the City Council did was disrespectful to all of our veterans, all of our people serving in the military, and disrespectful of the people of Berkeley by causing a firestorm of hatred and negativity, not just from the right wing, but from liberals and radicals who were mad at the insulting way that the city talked and voted on the language. So I strongly stood up against that. I was the only progressive on the council to fight against that. And at the same time, I've also gone to jail fighting for peace. So, I'm very committed to both peace and patriotism and politeness.
I think there are two specific issues. One is that the protest should have been against the president. He brought us into the war, not the Marines. So the protest was directed at George Bush, and I think that's totally conscionable, and that the city council should have done that. The second one is what's called good governance. I think it's deplorable that the city council did not read their packet of the information before they wrote their letter. So if you want to have checks and balance and quality, you better make sure what you're doing before you go out there and make a statement. The statement can be correct. In this case, they could have had a win-win. They could have taken on George Bush on the war, which we're all adamantly against. There's no subtlety about that. It's a catastrophic failure. On the other hand, there's also a responsibility to good government for the citizens of this town, and I think they absconded on that a little bit. So hopefully in the future, we can keep our principles, but do it in a more civilized manner and take on the right actor and actresses rather than leave it to a different rate. And one last thing. The Marines were here in 1776, which gave you the opportunity to be here today. So I don't think it was pointed at the Marines. I think it was all about George Bush and his cronies.
It's absolutely the case that our enlisted personnel, people that are in the military, whether it's Marines, Navy, Air Force, or Army, they are not the people that put us in this war. And they do not deserve our disrespect or any of our frustrations. They deserve our support. I think it is appropriate for governing bodies to speak out about what some consider the predatory practices of recruitment now. Because I think many of you know people who were recruited by the military and made certain promises that then were not fulfilled. And many people enlisted for this current war expecting certain benefits or expecting certain payments or or expecting one term, expecting only to have one term of service. And now they're being sent 3, 4 terms. So what I appreciate is people speaking out that the military has the right to recruit, but we want you to recruit fairly. And all of us have the right to enlist. But when we enlist, we want to be enlisting in a way where you're telling us really the facts. You're not pulling the wool over our eyes and trying to promise us something that you don't really intend to deliver. So I think that's appropriate. But disrespecting the military, telling them they shouldn't be here, no. And I also wouldn't have given Code Pink a bullhorn because they know how to be loud. They don't need the bullhorn to be loud.
Okay. Right here on the aisle. Yes, you. Dealing with Lonnie Hancock's long-term projects.
Well, I think Lonnie should be applauded on some of her projects and be supported. The ones on good governance make sense, should be definitely continued. The one she has on career technical education, I don't know if you're familiar with that, really putting more emphasis on the green technology and training people to work in solar installations is great. It's a joint labor management business and brings the universities and community colleges. That's great. I think what she's done on the toxic spill is great, so I think that's great. I think there's a lot more that has to go on, too, in leadership in Sacramento. In the essence, right now, we stalled totally on healthcare reform. SB 840 is going no place at the moment. AB 8 went down to defeat. That was the compromise bill this year. So we got to get some things started on that. We definitely have to do something on developing more socially responsible businesses. So all of you have jobs that are really quality jobs, doing things to help society. So I think Lonnie's left her mark, and we just have to move on and make it even better, raise the bar further.
One of the things I'm doing right now is I'm supporting her in her race for the Senate so that she can continue her race in the legislature and I can work with her as an assembly person. I think we should start with the clean money bill that she brought forward to say, let's get the money out of politics. Let's equalize the playing field so anybody who wants to raise a voice can do so to represent us. And it's not about the lobbies making choices for all of us. I would continue the work that Lonnie Hancock has started around foster care. I would look to extend the safety net that would be provided for young adults transitioning out of foster care from 18 to 21. Right now at 18, we say, young people, you have to leave. What's happening is youth are entering into the criminal justice system. They become homeless at a rate of 50%, and they suffer illness at very high rates and unemployment at very high rates. Youth who are in foster care graduate college at less than 3%, even though the state has money set aside called the Chafee Grant to help youth. I would change the legislation to say that we work with young adults who don't have families who are transitioning out of foster care to 21, and I would extend vocational education. Lonnie created a high school program that's in my district, and I would continue to work with her on getting the money out of the politics.
Thank you. Well, I'll continue to do the good things that Lonnie does, like on clean money, education, and environment, especially the education in Contra Costa. But I'm the only candidate here who has dared to stand up to Lonnie Hancock and say, you're wrong. When she said she wanted 50,000 more prison beds here in the state of California, you know, I love Lonnie Hancock. I used to volunteer in her office when she was mayor. But I'm the one who said, Lonnie, you're wrong. We don't need 50,000 more prison beds at $15 billion, which is then going to take away money for education for the next 200 years in the state of California in order to pay the high-paid prison guards. All of this money is going to be taken away from education to subsidize all of these prison beds that she voted to get built, supporting Schwarzenegger's the most drastic prison expansion plan in the country, in the state, in history. Why do we need 50,000 more prison beds? Let's get 50,000 more people getting a good education. Let's put that money into the important priorities of our state. And unlike Lonnie Hancock, who has passed almost no bills, Wilma Chan has passed most of her bills, got through the legislature. I got 98% of my bills through in the city council. I'll do the same thing like Wilma Chan did. I will be successful and a leader in the state.
I happened to meet Lonnie when I was an undergrad here. Her then husband, Joe Hancock, was a professor in plant pathology. And I was a student of his, and I was in a class, and she wanted to stop Berkeley. In those days, the city of Berkeley used to drive trucks up and down the street and spray all the street trees in the parks with pesticides to fight, the pests in the trees. And people didn't like that. So she wanted to change that. But the city government, when she initiated it, she was on the city council, they said, oh no, you can't get rid of chemicals. If you get rid of chemicals, all our trees are gonna die. So she went to her husband and said, how can we figure that out? So he asked us, we're students, we're cheap labor, right? So we figured out a plan, what the city of Berkeley could do to take care of its street trees and the parks without any chemicals. We presented it to the city council. The city council adopted it, making Berkeley the first city in the United States to eliminate the use of chemicals, herbicides, pesticides within the city. I was 20 when that happened, 19 or 20. That was an incredible experience to be part of a project all of a sudden where a city adopts it. It's the first policy in the entire United States, and then multiple cities all over the country began to adopt it. So she was my mentor. She inspired me incredibly. When I was on the council, she was mayor. I ran her 2002 assembly campaign, and I'm very, very honored to have her support. What would I do? And I am the only candidate with her who has her endorsement. How much do you think it's going to cost each of us? How much do we have to raise to run for this assembly race? Come on, guesses, somebody. $300,000 to $400,000. How many of you think you have the ability to raise $340,000 or $400,000 to run for an office? It's an outrageous amount of money, and it's a barrier. It's a complete barrier to democracy and to all of you and most of us for ever being able to become real participants in this legislature. Lonnie initiated the fight in California for clean money. I will continue that fight. That's what we need, so all of you and all of us can really participate in this democracy.
Okay, once again, I want to thank the candidates, and please come on over to the Institute for Governmental Studies right now, spend a little time, get to know them, and see you all next week. Thanks.